many different churches, many different parts of your community with us today. And I want to thank you all for giving me the privilege of coming here to be with me today. I also want to recognize my friend Tony Newman, Tony, and the great job that you do. And also, if you'll allow me, our Labour Party friends that we have with us today. I want to recognize Diane Abbott. Diane, who has been a trailblazer all her life, who has broken through the glass ceilings that were in the way. And there are lots and lots of people who today are in politics because of what Diane did. So Diane, thank you. I want to recognize Steve Reed, the local MP. Steve has been an assiduous representative here. He is a huge asset to the Labour Party. Steve, you're a great friend to me. Thank you very much for everything you do. I want to recognize Sarah Jones, who's our candidate in Croydon Central nearby. Sarah, I think, has knocked on tens of thousands of doors since she became our candidate. She is working incredibly hard for the people of Croydon Central, and I know she will if she's a Member of Parliament. So, Sarah, thank you. And then I want to recognize one other person, last but certainly not least. I would say last but most, and that is Doreen. Doreen, it is an enormous privilege to have you in our party and representing the Labour Party in the House of Lords. But I think I can say for this community, you don't just represent the Labour Party. You represent people right across the black community. And actually you represent people right across our country who have been the victims of injustice. And look, I think if all of us think about what you have been through, and think about the incredible courage that you have shown, the incredible fortitude you have shown, it makes us truly humble. So Doreen, thank you. Now friends, it is an enormous privilege to share your time of worship with you this morning. And I've been thinking a lot over the last few days about what I wanted to say to you and about the stakes that are facing us here at this election. And he does lots of things, doesn't he? He even gets me water. That is, he's multi-purpose. Thank you, Pastor. Truly a servant of the people. Look, the thing, I've been to Croydon a number of times, and the last time I was here, I was talking again about the aftermath of the riots. And look, I want to start, that's where I want to start. Because coming here just after the riots of summer of 2011, I know so many of you were touched by what happened here. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all of the things that you did to help heal things in the immediate aftermath of the riots. So many of you guided by your Christian faith, your belief in God, and your belief in helping each other. That is what makes a community strong, and I want to thank you for it. And I know so many of you have worked so hard to put the community back together again after the riots. And you know, that reminds me then of the stakes at this election and what we're talking about at this election, because there's lots of froth at elections. There's lots of things that are less important at elections. There's lots of trivia at elections. And what's important at elections is to get away from all of the sound and fury that comes from all parties and focus on what are the big choices. What are the big questions that we face as a country? And that's really what I want to talk about. And it's really this question, which is what kind of society do we want to be? It's actually the oldest question of all in politics and the oldest question of all that face countries. And I think there are some basic questions that you all have to think about in the next 2.5 weeks about what kind of society we want to be. Do we want to be a country where we leave each other to fend for ourselves? Or do we want to be a country that looks after each other? Do we want to be a country where those at the top, the richest in our society, do well, but everyone else gets left behind? Or do we believe that we prosper together as a country? Do we think we can build a future for our young people, which doesn't mean that they think they'll have a worse life than their parents, but they'll have a better life than their parents, and that they can do better than the last generation, which is something I think we'd want, all of us would want for our own kids? Do we want to be a society where we divide? And Pastor Damien talked about this just now. Do we want to be a society where we divide and we cause resentment against each other? Or do we actually think that we have much more in common with each other than divides us? I think these are the fundamental questions of this election. And look, for me, I want us to turn the page. I want us to turn the page as a country. And that's really what the next couple of weeks is all about for me. And I want to put this in very, very concrete terms about what this means. And you'll want to ask me in questions about this. It means giving every young person in our country a chance to get on. Not just those who want to go to university, to cut the tuition fee for them, but to say to our young people, you can have hope again. We'll guarantee you a job. We'll guarantee you an apprenticeship. We'll guarantee you the chance to get on. Because it's better for our whole country if each of our young people does well. It's not just a tragedy for them if they are left out, it's a disaster for our country. It's some other basic questions too. Do we reward the hard work of everybody in our country? So many people in our country are struggling to pay the bills. Do we raise the minimum wage? Do we say we're not going to have that exploitation of 0 hours contracts, that insecurity that is rife in so many communities? Are we actually going to say, look, we believe that it's when communities are strong and people are strong and working people are strong, that's when a country succeeds? Do we say we're going to build more affordable housing for our young people and for families? And say we're not going to have people ripped off renting in the private sector, which so many people have, I know here in Croydon. Do we say to disabled people that we're going to recognize you as valued parts of our society, scrap the bedroom tax, which affects so many vulnerable and disabled people in our country, and say, actually, we're going to stand with you rather than against you? And above all, and this goes back to this point that Pastor Damien was making, do we say that the color of your skin is not going to determine the way you are treated in our country? Because look, what strikes me is that we have equality before the law in our country, but we don't yet have real equality. The battle for me for equality is not yet won. I know we have such a long way to go. It's why if we're in government, we're going to have a race equality strategy across every government department to look at the barriers of discrimination in employment among our young people, in education among our young people, in justice and policing, which is such a big issue still in our country, in every area. Because that is what motivated me to join the Labour Party. You know, I joined the Labour Party at the age of 17, and I joined because I believed in equality. And I believe in equality still today. And there'll be some people who say we rest on our laurels, and haven't we achieved a lot as a country? I'm less interested in what we've achieved and more interested in what we've still got to achieve. And I know we've got so much more to achieve. I know so many people in this community and so many communities around the country are saying, this country doesn't feel like it really works for me. Let me say one other thing before we get to questions. I have a view that most politicians probably don't, which is that politics is too important to be left to politicians. If you leave it to the politicians, you won't get the change you want to see. Think about the changes that have happened throughout our world and throughout our country. They didn't happen because nice politicians came along and said, let's make them happen. They happened because people demanded they happen. Think about Diane Abbott. Think about Diane Abbott and all of her colleagues who broke through the glass ceilings. They didn't wait. They didn't say, we're going to have some nice person who's in power give me opportunity. That's certainly not the case with Diane. Diane said, I won't wait. Enough is enough. I'm going to break through the glass ceiling. Think about Doreen. Think about Doreen and what she had to fight for and what she had to fight through. If Doreen had said, I'm going to wait for a nice person to come along and help me and do it for me, she wouldn't have got at least towards the justice that she rightly demanded. It's because she didn't wait. She didn't say, I'll wait for somebody else. She said, enough is enough. I demand change happens, and I'm not going to rest until change happens. And that is true of all of us, friends. If we think politics is just about me, or just about Diane, or just about Steve, or just about Sarah, or just about Tony, then we won't get the change that we need. It is about all of us. It is about all of us. It's about saying, what did Doreen say? Doreen said, look, if we're going to reform policing in this country, I'm going to play my role. As somebody who's been a victim, who's seen what happened, she said, call on me. Call on me to make the change happen. What did Diane say? Diane said, call on me. I'm not going to wait for other members of my community to get the chance. I'm going to break through the glass ceiling. She said, call on me. And look, the thing I say to people here in Croydon is if I'm your Prime Minister, you'll be able to call on me. You'll be able to call on me to be your friend. But I also call on you, because that is the way that political change happens. Don't just wait for it. Don't just hope someone else will do it. Demand the change. Make the change happen. Say, call on me. Call on me to make the change happen. because that is the way change around the world has always happened. And you know, people, the last thing I'll say, people come to change through different ways. Some people come through faith. Some people come through religion. Some people come through other ways. But however we come to that change, however we come to that demand for justice, we can come together. We may come to it from different places, but we can come to the same point. We can come to the same point that says a more equal, a more fair, a more just society is what we all believe in. We know that's not the country we live in at the moment. We know we can make the change happen. We can only do it if we do it together. Thank you for having me here today. Let's make the change happen that we want to see in our country. Thank you very much.
Okay. It's not very often you get politicians to stick to the time given to them, but you've done very well, Ed. Can I just ask you to sit down? We're going to take questions now. We already asked people to send in questions beforehand. So the first question is going to come from Peter.
You're holding it outstanding. Okay. My name is Pastor Peter. I'm a member of Praise House. My question borders on freedom. In recent years, we have seen Christians disciplined as a result of wearing the cross. We have also seen Christian NHS workers disciplined as a result of sharing their faith. There are also Christians who, on the basis of their faith, like a Christian magistrate and counselor who were disciplined as well because of their beliefs in terms of marriage. There are also Christian street preachers who have been arrested and others who have been challenged in the different sections of our community just because of their faith. My question to you, sir, is what would you do to promote Christian freedoms? Would you enact a legislation in terms of areas relating to freedom of conscience?
Well, look, Peter, I think the question you ask is a really important question. And I think religious freedom is incredibly important. And that's something we prize in our country. And we must do everything we can to make sure that that religious freedom is protected. And I am very clear about that. And the articulation of people's Christian faith is an important thing that people should be absolutely allowed to do. I would add this, though. There isn't just a challenge here at home, and I think this was implied in your question. It's true around the world as well, because we see the persecution of Christians all around the world today. 80% of religious persecution is of Christians. And one of the things that we've said is that we'll have an envoy for religious freedom based in the Foreign Office, whose job it is to actually fight for religious freedom around the world. So absolutely we should look at how we protect the freedom of expression that people have. I think it's an important part of our country, and it's important here and in the rest of the world.
Next question is coming from Professor Danso.
Okay. Okay. Right. My question pertains to the role of the church. Now, the churches are not only meeting in halls to worship, but they are also heavily involved in serving their communities. A recent survey found that the value of the church's involvement was about 35 billion, and this is excluding contributions from individual Christians or Christian charities. But many churches encounter suspicion or confusion from local authorities and find it hard to be trusted to deliver services or access funding. My question, number one, what will you do about this? 2, do you believe that the church has a valuable role to play in Britain? And 3, what would Labour Party do to promote the church if you win the elections? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I forgot to say at the beginning that difficult questions are going to be answered by Steve Reed, Tony, and Sarah. And really difficult questions by Doreen and Diane. Look, the thing I would say to you is I had some experience of this as the Minister for Charities. It was my first job in government as Minister for Charities. And I think one of the things that we had to counter was sometimes suspicion among, as you were central government in this case, about faith-based organizations because they didn't really understand the nature of the organization. And so the faith-based organization might have been doing an incredibly important role on youth services or the elderly, and they were, being held back because of the suspicion that there was. So I think we've got to try and get around that suspicion, whether it's in local authorities or elsewhere. And we've got to take people at face value, if you like, and say, well, what is it you're trying to do, and can you achieve change for the community? Can you make a difference? And if you can, then you should be able to do it. We shouldn't worry about people's motivation in how they want to do that. Secondly, on your point about the churches in our community, look, I think they play an incredibly important role in our community, not just this community, but so many communities around the country. If you take the issue of food banks, for example, look, we're going to reach, I think, a pretty shameful milestone for our country next week, which is 1 million people using food banks. But amidst the fact that this is something that is terrible that it's happening in Britain in 2015, you've got incredible people in our communities, in food banks, who are wanting to help out people who are in food poverty. And I think it's not just there, but it's in so many areas, which is that, you have people in the church, from the church, churches playing an incredibly important role in tackling social injustice in our community. And that is something that I would want to work with you on if I was Prime Minister.
Okay, we got the next question here from Jonathan.
Hi, Ed. Welcome back to Croydon.
Thank you.
Good to see you in Croydon twice in 6 months.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you many more times
Definitely.
after. Today, it's not only about the church. One of the things we are concerned about as the church in Croydon is about what you're going to do with regards interfaith links. What can a future Labour government do to help faith groups foster stronger interfaith links and cooperation? And will a Labour government work towards integrating all London's rail services under TfL? Secondly, what is Labour's plan for growing the economy, building houses to meet rising demand for affordable homes, caring for the elderly and the sick?
Okay, I think you're covering lots of bases with that question. Let me try and deal with those questions. I think you're right about interfaith dialogue. I think it's incredibly important. And I think, what is it that breeds prejudice? It's ignorance. And the best counter to prejudice is information, knowledge, and people working together. So I completely agree we should do everything we can to encourage the kind of interfaith dialogue that I think is so important for our country, and we would want to work with you and others in making that happen. On the issue of rail services, I'm sympathetic, very sympathetic to that idea that we do more to devolve transport services. And I think there are lots and lots of people in this community and others who are deeply dissatisfied with our rail services, and we need to do more to actually help out. And I know it's a big issue in Croydon. It's a big issue that Sarah has been campaigning on in this constituency. And then the third, and housing. So, of all the crises that we face as a country, I think the housing crisis is one of the biggest. And we have a plan to build 200,000 homes a year, but not just to build homes, to make sure they're affordable homes, and not just to make sure they're affordable homes, but affordable homes that can be accessed by the local community. So setting aside those homes for the local community, not for buy-to-let landlords from out of town, because I think that can make a big difference to people. And then this issue of the private sector. Look, so many families, and there'll be people here today, face just deep insecurity renting from private landlords. Substandard housing, no security, no sense of fairness in terms of rents. We're going to change all that. A proper national register of landlords so that we can guarantee decent housing conditions. 3-year tenancies, not 1-year tenancies. So you're not going to be told you've got to be chucked out of your home at like a moment's notice. Within those 3 years, predictable rents. So that actually you're not told the rent's going up by 10% and you can't pay the bills. And the housing crisis, of all the things that I'll be dealing with as Prime Minister, it's got to be in the top 2 or 3 issues, because we've got to build homes again as a country, and we will.
Next question, Abby.
Good morning, Mr. Miliband. I'm Abby Olufemi.
Hi.
I like your tie, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Kind of matches my dress.
Yeah, thank you. I knew that was going to happen, actually. It was all part of the coordination. Well, I thought we wouldn't let them into that secret that we had coordinated.
My question is on the family.
Yeah.
The UK has the highest rate of family breakdown in Western Europe. The family value will cost the public purse £47 billion this year. By the time a child is 15, they are more likely to have a smartphone than a father in the house. Strong, intact families are good for the economy, good for the healthcare, good for strengthening all social fabric and preventing the vulnerable from falling through the cracks. And my question to you, sir, is how will Labour commit to promoting and supporting marriage as well as family?
Can I throw it back to you for a second? Yes. Tell me what, I'll give you my answer in a second, but what would you think? What do you think would make the biggest difference? You know, you have experience in the community, you see the community up close, you see some of the issues you're talking about. What do you think would make the biggest difference?
I'm wondering why he's giving me the difficult question.
You asked it after all.
Well, what I think actually is that it's time again for Great Britain. This is the Great Britain.
Yeah.
Well, not quite that I grew up in. I'm coming from immigrant parents myself, and we've had to raise our children in this Great Britain. And from my experience as a wife and as a mother, I know a lot of it depends on what starts in the home.
Agreed.
But when my authority as a parent is being taken away from me by government policy, so in the area of perhaps nurturing and loving, when my child says to me, well, this doesn't happen in my home, thank goodness, because I am a good mom. But, you know, in other homes where parents are actually afraid to parent because of the nanny state culture, a child will get a sense of who he is or who she is, say, from outside on the streets, because the government says, we have authority over your parents. I think that, you know, the breakdown, it's not the Britain that I grew up in, and that, you know, and as you can see, we've turned out to be good citizens, giving back and contributing. We didn't need the government to tell us that we were not to put our feet on the seat, or that we were not to do certain things in public. That authority rests with the family that nurtures. But we see now that there's a lot of interference and intervention that is anti what is very traditional Britain. And that, you know, gives me a lot of concern.
Okay, okay. I think knowing Diane as I do and catching her, I think she's got some views on this. But look, let me say what I think about this. Look, I think we always should be aware that parents have primary responsibility for bringing up their kids. But I think it's also the case that government can make it easier or harder. And I want to suggest something slightly different to what you said, which is about our economy. But look, we think about our economy in the way of it being about the economy and can you pay the bills and jobs and so on. I don't think it's just about that. It's about whether you create strong and stable families. Look, if you work 60 or 70 hours a week, it's much harder to spend time with your kids. If you're having to do 2 or 3 jobs, and you have to do shift work in the middle of the night, and there isn't the childcare, it's much harder to spend time with your kids. Now, there are so many parents who are doing that and doing a brilliant job of being parents. So in a way, I applaud them for what they do. But I think it is partly about what kind of economy do we want, produces what kind of families do we have. And I think that is one of the biggest areas we've got to change. And that goes to it. Look, secondly, I'll say this also about schools and the responsibility of schools. Look, I did my bit passing exams, but I would say schools aren't just about passing exams. I think schools are also about supporting families, giving young people resilience. You know, something I would say about young people, I'm sure some of the things that you said are right. What strikes me about being a young person today is there's never been a better time in a way to be a young person because of the opportunity. But I think there's never been a more stressful time to be a young person as well. You've got pressures of the internet, peer pressure, pressures to succeed, to what you have to do, what you have to wear, and all of that. And in a way, I think schools have got quite a big responsibility. It's interesting, I go around the country doing question and answer sessions with young people. You know what the biggest question young people ask me? It's actually not about tuition fees, they ask me about that. It's not about apprenticeships, they ask me about that. It's about mental health, right? It's about, you know, I'll always get a young person at a session I'm due who'll say, I had mental health issues, my school didn't really realize, I didn't feel I could talk to my parents, there was no one there for me. So we've got to support parents, you're absolutely right about that. But the way we support parents is with decent childcare, is with a decent economy that actually works for them, and with schools that support parents as well. And look, I don't think parents should feel that they haven't got a right to parent. Of course they should. But I think there's some of the solutions that I would propose to you.
Okay, just one more question from Mary, since you've already started talking about young people.
Thank you very much. I sit as the National Director for the Teenagers for the Redeemed Christian Church of God.
For the what, sorry?
For the Redeemed Christian Church of God. I'm the National Director for all the teenagers all over United Kingdom. Question. The youths are feeling very disaffected. And we saw a couple of that in the 2011 stuff that happened, especially also the young people in the Christendom. And they're saying, what would the government do for them? For example, if Labour comes into place, what would they do for them to be able to, one, practice their faith, two, to be able to be fulfilled in that which they needed to do, with all the mentoring and all those kind of things that should be given to them. They are looking onto that. And also, the parents are saying, would they have the freedom to be able to take their children out of school from sex education? Because that is becoming a problem.
Okay, so let me answer those questions. So on the first thing about young people, your question was really what would we do for young people? You know, and I do want to say to this community, which is an engaged community, let's be honest, we have a big challenge of getting our young people to vote. We have a big challenge of getting our young people engaged in politics. And people have till tomorrow to register to vote at this general election. And I know there's been huge work done to actually persuade people to register, but we need to persuade our young people to register to vote. I mean, I'd like them to vote Labour, obviously, but we need to persuade them to register because, you know, we need their voice to be heard. So what would we do? We'd guarantee young people a job. So every young person out of work for more than a year, we'd guarantee them a job. But that's the basics for our young people. Secondly, a decent education. And that means apprenticeships for our young people who want them, and it means university that can be afforded, cutting the tuition fee from £9,000 to £6,000. It means housing for our young people, because you've got to give housing to our young people so they can actually get on the housing ladder, because that is such a frustration for so many of our young people. I think there's another thing, though, which is about opportunity for our young people. You know, we had made this announcement on Friday, and it didn't get that much attention, but it's important, which is limiting these internships that they have, where you have to work for free for like month after month after month. We're going to limit to a month by law. And the reason you might say, well, why are you limiting that? Is that about limiting opportunity? No, it's about expanding opportunity, because otherwise you get a situation where it's only those who can afford it can actually go and do these opportunities. You know, I believe in a country where there's opportunity to everybody, where actually opportunities are open, not closed. And I think that's the most important message for our young people. Now, on the practicing of our young people and their faith, that's incredibly important, and we should protect it. On sex and relationship education, look, I'm a supporter of sex and relationship education, I've got to say to you, because I just sort of say this to you as a father of two young boys. It's got to be appropriate. It's got to be appropriate and at the appropriate ages. And there'll be certain newspapers, dare I say it, who want to scare people about this. But you just got to think about who are the people who are supporting this. You've got a coalition which ranges from the NSPCC, the Protection for Cruelty to Children, to a whole range of people who are supporting this. Why are they supporting this? Because we want our young people to know what it is to have appropriate friendships and relationships. This is absolutely about saying to our young people, what is the basis for healthy relationships, not unhealthy relationships? And let's be honest, parents do incredible work, but there's lots and lots of pressures from the internet and elsewhere teaching unhealthy relationships between young people, between girls and boys and girls and all of that. So we want healthy relationships among our young people, and for me that's what sex and relationship education is about, and it's got to be age appropriate, and I know that is important.
I'm afraid I have to stop the questions now, because for those of you who still have more questions, there isn't really time for us right now to take them.
I don't mind carrying on.
You don't mind carrying on? Jill, are you happy?
I'll get into trouble with Jill. I always get into trouble with Jill. Okay. But I don't mind. Look, if there are more people who want to ask questions, I'm happy to carry on.
I'm going to ask Father Michael, because he has a follow-up question to the one that you just asked.
Okay.
So can I just take that?
Yeah.
It's good to see you with us in Croydon. Thank
Great.
you for finding the time to be with us. And before I ask my question, I want to say thank you very much for making a commitment to do away with the bedroom tax.
Great, thank
That's
you.
hurt so many people, so many vulnerable people. We appreciate that, don't we, very much. So thank you for doing that. My question is around schools. Someone touched on schools, and you made a reference to schools as well. I'm a priest in the Southwark Diocese. We've got 39,000 children going to our Catholic schools. We've got 3,600 teachers employed in our Catholic schools. Now, up and down the country, faith communities have Catholic schools, Anglican schools, etc. My question is around faith schools. What kind of commitment can we expect from the new Labour government to work with us and support us in Catholic education, in education right across the board with all our faith schools? Is there a commitment to work with faith schools? They are good for our communities. Sure. They turn out good kids. They welcome kids. At my local school here, we've got over 2,500 people going to church every week. And in our schools, we welcome children from all faiths, all denominations.
I can give you a straight answer. It's rare you get that from a politician, and the answer is yes, definitely. Because, look, I know that lots and lots of faith schools play a really important role in our communities, and lots of faith schools actually open their doors to people from a whole range of backgrounds. And, look, we want good education for people. That's the bottom line. And I know there's so many faith schools that provide that, so I absolutely can reassure you on that point.
Just to show our involvement, because we're committed to interfaith work, I'm just going to have the final word from two people.
Okay.
Ade, who is coming from the Black Christian Leadership Forum, and Bushra, who is going to speak on behalf of the Broad Green area, because you have come into our area. So Ade first.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. We spent 3 or 4 years producing this manifesto. It's never been done. It was black church leaders who felt, like you said, we need to do something now, fit the system, and we have 9 sections here touching on the areas that affect our community. We researched it for almost 4 years. We've launched it. I've had an endorsement from Stephen Timms and David Lamy. One of the things we now want to do with the next government who comes in is each section, we're putting 10 experts from our community in each section. And we want those 10 experts to be able to speak to the portfolio ministers or Secretary of States in the next government to begin to walk through the recommendations in it. And when you look at each section, we have not only asked what the government can do, we've also put there what we should be doing as the church and community and what we and government must do together. So I'm also encouraging you, please, that when that time comes, if you get in there and form a government, we would like to come back and sit down and begin to walk through this hard work. This is the voice of our people. It's never been done, but the church leaders are saying, let's work together and make our community a better place.
Very good.
Hello. I'd just like to welcome you here as well, Ed. As you know, the riots happened just down the road and you can still see the damage that was done. But I'd like to say, you said, come to us and ask you for help. And after the riots we did, we went with Steve Reed and we met you. And I'm glad to say that it did make a difference and we did get our compensation. So sometimes it does work, and I think we should thank people for that if they do what they say, because I think that's really important that we have trust in our politicians. And the other thing I'd like to say, I am a Muslim and I live here, but I speak as a member of the whole community. But I think that we need to be more involved and have people like me be more involved in the broad range of things so that we have that view, but we're not bringing that view just from our isolated positions as a faith member or something else, but as a member of the community who's integrated, who's lived here all their life. And I think more people like that should be part of whatever you're doing in your strategies. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I say 2 more words? Look, I just want to thank you, Pastor Damien, for having me here again, and I'm incredibly grateful to you. Look, there'll be some people who came here not really not political, and I have huge, total respect for that. Some people who are supporters of ours. I just want to say one other thing. I mean, we've got Sarah here. Sarah's fighting a very close election in Croydon Central. if you like what you've heard and you think you want Sarah to be elected and me to be elected, my only appeal to me, humble appeal to you, would be to be part of it and try and make it happen, because it will depend on you what happens in the next 2.5 weeks. This is going to be a close election. It's going to be one of the closest elections we've known for a long time. Whether Sarah gets elected will shape whether I get elected, whether we have a Labour government, and whether Sarah gets elected will actually depend on people knocking on doors and making a difference. There's a lady who wants to say something. Yeah? Oh, right, okay.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Can you just take a seat?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Cheers.
The next thing we have now is that we're going to pray for Ed. We did say we're going to pray. So Bishop Mark Nicholson, Pastor Melody, can you come forward, please? We're going to pray. Yes, and can I just ask Adek and Father Michael, can you just come? We're going to pray. We're just going to pray. Because we're a Christian community, we're a faith group, we believe in the power of prayer. So, Abby, can you join me? Now, can you just lead us in prayer?
No, you said you've been standing long enough, so we're appreciative. Could I ask the congregation at this moment to stand at this moment? It is indeed an honor that we are standing as leaders in Croydon. It instructs us from the scriptures in the book of Timothy that we should pray for those that are in authority. And so we're going to just do that God will give you wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Give you the strength and the passion to do the job that you've been called to do. And so we stand together as leaders to pray. I'm going to ask the congregation that they would to put their hands forward towards Ed at this moment as we pray. We all have that mandate to pray. And so we're going to ask you all to pray. And leaders, I want you to pray as I lead. Father, in the name of Jesus, we come before you. We lift up Ed Miliband. You know him by name and by nature. We thank you, Lord, for his passion towards the work that he wants to accomplish. Again, we ask you that you will give him wisdom, knowledge, and understanding.